We begin in Lebanon. Now, Israel had a ceasefire for about 6 weeks or so with Hezbollah in Lebanon. During that period, Hezbollah, not surprisingly, spent time recruiting new fighters and trying to get new weapons. Israel has substantially cut off major weapons supply channels for Hezbollah because they were getting their weapons in through Syria, Iran, into Syria, and then land route from Syria into Lebanon. But because of the chaos in Syria, with the overthrow of Assad's government, and on top of it, Israel already had destroyed land routes to Syria. So Hezbollah has been substantially weakened in being able to resupply. Nevertheless, they've been resupplying, and the ceasefire is now over. They just shot 2 missiles into Israel. Israel started killing their leaders, and here we go. Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's their first hit of Beirut since the ceasefire. That is, there's southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah are based near the Israeli border, and then there's the capital city of Beirut.
Let's see. Let's start with Mr. Huckabee.
The United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee held hearings this past week on Mike Huckabee, who's Trump's nominee for American ambassador to Israel. This will be a somewhat extended segment, the longest segment of this morning. It's extremely significant. It's the next ambassador to Israel, and happened this past week.
Chairman Risch and Ranking Member Shaheen, distinguished members of the committee, I want to say thank you very, very much for giving me the privilege of coming to...
Sorry about that. Committee will come back to order, and Mr. Huckabee, please proceed.
I will mark them down undecided, Senator.
I
want to thank you for the privilege of coming before you today as you conduct the constitutional obligation of advise and consent of those who have been nominated by the President to serve as an ambassador to our beloved nation. The founders recognized that Senate approval was not necessarily Senate agreement with the President, his policies, or even with those he selected to represent him. But the Senate affirms that those nominated be thoroughly examined to determine moral and legal fitness to serve. I'm aware that not everyone on this committee will agree with the President's policies or his personnel choices in his administration. I'm not here to articulate or even defend my own views or policies, but rather to present myself as one who will respect and represent the overwhelmingly elected president. President Trump's historic first-term success with the Abraham Accords, I believe, gives us real hope of what will happen over the next 4 years. And I'm grateful that President Trump has charged me with the extraordinary privilege to serve as ambassador to the State of Israel if confirmed. I'm blessed to have a wonderful and supportive family, especially my wife of almost 51 years, Janet, who is with me today. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, we look quite young to have been married 51 years, but we got married when we were 18. And in Arkansas, we were considered late bloomers. My 3 adult children and my 7 grandchildren are watching, and I'm grateful for them. I grew up in a small orange brick shotgun rent house in a little town called Hope, Arkansas. No male upstream from me, not one, in my entire family lineage had ever graduated from high school. The very notion that I would one day be governor of my state or be nominated to serve as an ambassador would have been laughable in my childhood. I stand here today grateful to God for his grace and goodness, and it is the only explanation for my being here. I would say the same for the nation that I've been nominated to deploy to. Israel is a tiny nation the size of New Jersey. And it's the only rational explanation for its existence in various forms for the past 3,500 years would be the grace and
Christianity to justify ethnic cleansing. Huckabee misuses Christianity to justify ethnic cleansing. Free Palestine senators.
What?
Me in the class, they've been waiting.
Okay.
Ask him about the end game of Christian Zionism for Palestinians in Israel. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
The good news is we won't see those people ever here.
Well, the good news is they're not members of my family, which might be the case protesting me sometimes. I first visited Israel almost 52 years ago. It was the summer of 1973. It was just 3 months before the Yom Kippur War. I was 17 years old, right out of high school. It was a month before my 18th birthday. And despite my growing up in poverty, my soon-to-be college roommate came from an affluent family. We really were the prince and the pauper. My friend wanted to take a senior trip to the Middle East. Now, his father was willing to let him go, but only if I went along, and the father offered to pay my way to make it possible. In that summer, we went to Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel. All of them were fascinating, but it was Israel that had an impact on me that 52 years later, I still find hard to explain. I started taking groups of people to visit there in 1981. I've led tens of thousands of people to visit the Bible lands. The number of trips that I've made there probably approximates 100. I've made deep and lasting friendships among Jewish and Arab populations.
Israel and U.S. have desecrated the Holy Land. Not desecrating the Holy Land. Ethnic cleansing. Stop the ethnic cleansing. Stop the ethnic cleansing.
Thank you, Senator. I still believe it is the promised land.
This does not go on during most hearings unless there's a Jewish interface so that they can attack Jews or Israel. But for all other countries and all other, it just doesn't happen. And this happened 4 years ago and 4 years before that. Whether it's the worst of anti-Semites on the right or in recent decades, it's mostly on the left. This is what it is, and we live with it. And he, therefore, as everyone in that room, they know it's coming. They smile, they wait for it to blow over, and then he just comes back with where he left off.
Land. It's holy ground to Jews, Christians. I've led tens of thousands of people to visit the Bible lands. The number of trips that I've made there probably approximates 100. I've made deep and lasting friendships among Jewish and Arab populations.
Israel and U.S. have desecrated the
Thank you, Senator. I still believe it is the promised land. It's holy ground to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Since 1948, when Israel was finally recognized as an independent Jewish state, it has always been under attack. The first nation to officially recognize Israel was the United States, when our president, Harry S. Truman, did so within minutes of it being constituted as an independent state. Israel faced an immediate war in 1948 from the nations that surrounded it. It had another one in 1956, 1967, 1973, and yet others in 1982, 1990, and 2014. The terrorist group Hamas launched an attack October the 7th of 2023 against innocent civilians, including pregnant women, elderly people, and even tiny and help. Senator, a wonderful question, because I feel like that this is one that everyone, Democrat, Republican, and the fact that you have bipartisan support to introduce that bill is very significant. I cannot imagine under any circumstances that any right-minded person would find it acceptable to support or to even acknowledge that there was justification in any way for the massacre of innocent civilians on October the 7th. If I'm confirmed, I will be absolutely clear to carry the president's policies. They have been clear that Hamas will have no future in Gaza. It can't. This was not simply a cold-blooded murder in which people came across the borders and shot innocent people. They massacred them. And they did it in the way that was most physically painful and in the way that was most personally humiliating. And worse, they videotaped themselves doing it because they were proud of it. And they published it with pride. And they announced repeatedly that they would do it again. Hamas is not a government, it's not a standing army, it is a terrorist organization, and they acted like it. And they must be treated as such. And if confirmed, I would hope that this unfortunate, horrific war that has resulted in many, many deaths, including Americans, the taking of hostages for a longer period of time than even the hostages in 1979 were taken during the Iranian takeover, that all of that could come to an end and there could be accountability for what was done to Jewish people on October the 7th of 2023.
Weapon.
Senator, I appreciate the question because it gives me the opportunity to let you know that I absolutely believe that the president is taking the right course of action. He did it when his first term. The maximum pressure bankrupted the Iranians. It made it impossible for them to fund the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. They didn't have the money. When his term ended and President Biden took office, unfortunately, they relaxed some of those pressures. And the result was Iran had money again. They didn't use it to help their people. They used it to murder people in Israel through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, and through Hamas. I'm grateful to serve a president who recognizes that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon and that it is better to bankrupt them than it is to bomb them.
And Governor Huckabee, you're exactly right. The Trump administration took Iran's foreign reserves down from. Thank you.
And welcome, everybody. I want to associate myself.
This is the most anti-Semitic United States senator today. Many of us don't realize that he's not in the news the same way, but Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, he is the biggest anti-Semite Israel hater in the United States Senate. God forbid if he ever becomes president on the Democrat side. So you even can pick it up in some of his questions. He's very subtle, but he asks questions that put Israel and her supporters to make them look as bad as possible. He's a very, very evil person.
Myself with the remarks of Senator Shaheen, her opening remarks. Governor Huckabee, it was good to get together with you yesterday. I only got 5 minutes in this forum, so if you could keep your answers short. I'm just going to ask your views on certain principles. And It is absolutely true that the Jewish state needs a friend. I think you also recognize that there are many in the Jewish community here in the United States who disagree with the views that you've expressed with respect to certain issues in Israel. And I do want to ask you about.
It's important to pick up the little nuances. For him to say that there are a lot of Jews in America who disagree with Huckabee's pro-Israel attitudes.
Some of those, because you are seen as a big hero of the Jewish settler movement on the West Bank.
So he's referred to settlers, he's referred to the West Bank, and in a very nice way, by calling Huckabee a hero to the settlers on the West Bank, he's actually insulting him. And he's doing it on purpose. Smotrich, he's going to ask him about Smotrich in a moment. Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich is the finance minister of Israel, like the secretary of the treasury. And he is a leader of Jews living in Judea and Samaria, and is using his position as finance minister to redirect tons of money in the federal budget towards the communities of Judea and Samaria.
You supported the idea of Israeli annexation of the West Bank, as you've confirmed here today. So I want to know where you draw the line. I recognize that you will be the president's emissary, but you've made a lot of comments on this, so I'm interested in your thoughts. Do you agree with me that it would be wrong for a Jewish settler to push a Palestinian family off land on the West Bank that was owned by that Palestinian family? Do you agree with that?
Senator, thanks for the question. I think there are a lot of things attributed to me that aren't necessarily 100% accurate. I'm sure you would, if you've experienced that a time or two in your career.
That's why I'm trying to clarify. I'm asking some very simple questions.
A very simple question.
I'll give you
a very
answers.
simple answer. I believe that there has to be always the law being followed, and there has to be clarity. I also believe that it won't be my policy that will be implemented in the Middle East. It will be that of the president.
So this was a very simple question, Governor.
Yes, sir.
So we have a Palestinian family on the West Bank today. They own the land they're on. My question to you is, do you agree that it would be wrong for a Jewish settler to push that family off their land? Yes or no?
If we're talking about stealing the land, taking it away from them,
their land, yes.
that's a problem. If you're talking about purchasing the land, that's a legitimate transaction that.
Okay, so when you said in 2017, and I quote, Israel has title deed to Judea and Samaria, unquote, you did not mean it gave Israel the right to kick Palestinians off their lands in the West Bank. Am I right about that?
Senator, I've never indicated that that was a part of that. I simply referenced the biblical mandate that goes all the way back to the time of Abraham, 3,500 years ago, and that's what I was referencing.
Right. No, I understand you have that view, but I'm trying to understand the consequences of that view. So in your view, if Israel were to annex the West Bank, what rights would Palestinians have? Because when I asked you that question yesterday, you focused on the right to work, economic opportunities. So my question today is, would those Palestinian individuals in an annexed West Bank have the same legal and democratic rights as Israeli Jews living in the West Bank?
Annexation does not mean displacement of people.
No, I'm not asking about displacement right now. I'm asking if they remained there, would they have equal rights to Israeli Jews living on the West Bank?
There would be security. There would be opportunity.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
Governor. You know that.
No, I'm
So I'm asking whether they would
have
equal legal rights, whether they would have the same legal rights as a Israeli Jew who settled on the West Bank living side by side. Would they have the same legal and political rights?
Senator, if you mean would they be able to live freely, they already do.
How about voting? You're suggesting that the West Bank become part of Israel. Are you suggesting that Palestinians living in the West Bank should have the right then to vote in elections in Israel?
Senator, let me correct and say I'm not suggesting.
Let me move on.
Carry out the policies of the president.
I do want to ask you about the situation in Gaza because I think you would agree that it would be wrong to hold any innocent Palestinian civilian accountable for the evils of Hamas, right? I mean, that's just a simple principle. You don't believe in collective punishment, do you?
Senator, I don't believe in collective punishment.
Right.
If the Palestinians in Gaza have participated in the holding of hostages and in the torture,
Right.
then
So
they've got culpability.
But there are 2 million people right there. And Senator Merkley asked you earlier about withholding food, because for 23 days, there has been a ban on humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Finance Minister Smotrich suggested, and I'm quoting, it might be justified and moral to starve 2 million Palestinians in Gaza as part of a strategy to free the hostages. Simple question. Do you disagree with Finance Minister Smotrich?
Senator, as you know, an ambassador doesn't get to argue with the people of the country he goes to represent the United States in.
Right. But
my job is to represent the president and his policies.
Right.
And he has not given those to me because I've not been confirmed.
I understand. You are aware, are you not, Governor, that when he was asked whether the Palestinians who would leave Gaza under the president's plan could return, he said no. That doesn't sound like a voluntary program, does it?
What I've heard the president say is he does not push for forced displacement. I've also heard him say he wants a better life for the Palestinian people. He wants them to have security. He doesn't want their children to be put in front of the munitions of Hamas as they have.
Nobody does, Governor, but that's not the question.
But that's
I see
what
the
the
time's up.
president has said.
We did have I thought, an important conversation yesterday about the situation of some of the churches in Jerusalem and Israel who are feeling a lot of financial pressure because of actions being taken by municipalities in Israel, as well as a concern they have about a bill in the Knesset. You remember that conversation?
Yes, sir.
Right? And
Senator,
you agree
you're,
that we should
you're
work
over on your
together
time.
on that issue, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Senator, thank you. A wonderful question and an opportunity for me to remind everyone that it was during President Trump's first term that there really was peace. There was peace in the Middle East. He did extraordinary things to show our relationship to Israel in recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal indigenous capital of the Jewish people. When he moved the embassy, basically the entire world told him not to do it, that the world would blow up if he did it. He did it. I happened to be with him one-on-one about 2 weeks after he made that decision and announced it. I'll never forget, Senator, what he said to me, because I asked him, why did you do it? Everyone told you not to. The world leaders, people in government positions, they all said, don't do it. You did it. Why? I'll never forget. He looked at me very simply and said, because I said I would, and it was the right thing to do. And Senator, that's why I am honored and privileged to be able to be named by this president to serve in this capacity, because I like his sense of clarity when it comes to the moral issue of standing with an ally. And right now, Israel needs an ally. And frankly, let me add, the Jewish people need to know they have friends. There's a long line of enemies that the Jewish people experience across this globe, and sadly, on some of our own university campuses. It's going to be a privilege to be able to be one of those people, not Jewish, Christian in fact, but to say to our Jewish friends, you will never go through what you've gone through alone. We will stand not behind you, we will stand with you.
ستة ونص بدأ الخبط من كل الشقات على خلايا شمسية لها علاقة في الناس، على بيوت، على الناس، ما قدرناش نتحرك بالمرة. الساعة 7:30 رموا أعتقد منشور صغير خلال.
As you know, effectively, the so-called ceasefire is over in Hamas Gaza, and Hamas is not releasing any more hostages, living or dead. And so Israel's moving back in, and the Arabs from Rafah who had evacuated, you'll remember Israel had to go into Rafah. That's where they found and caught and killed Sinwar and other of the top leaders of Hamas. And that was when Kamala Harris said that she had studied all the maps in Rafah, and there would be a bloodbath, and Israel would end up killing like 1 million people. There's no way they can go to Rafah without killing like 100,000 or 1 million or whatever. And of course, Israel ended up going in, and despite Kamala Harris and her maps, nobody pretty much was killed in Rafah. But anyway, the people came back and now they're leaving again because things are getting serious there.
للسلطان وبدت الناس تخلف المناظر اللي انتم شايفينها، رمل، طينه، الناس مش عارفه تمشي، صايم الناس، لا قادر تمشي ولا قادر تطلع. هذا مش منظر نزوح، الوضع صعب كارثي، الوضع فيه اصابات، فيه قصف، الوضع صعب جدا جدا فوق ما تتصور.
القذائف في وسطنا، الرصاص فوقنا، اصابات، قتل، كل الشوارع تملت ناس صغار، شيوخ ترموا في الشوارع، ست كبيره بتقول لابنها روح وسيبنا موت. ايش لوين بدنا نصل احنا؟ لو اكتشفوا نضل في هالمعاناه، احنا ورانا صغار، ورانا اطفال، حرام عليهم، حسبي
It's a three-word answer: free the hostages.
الله ونعم الوكيل، فكل واحد وصلنا لهالمواصيل.
Again, the way media presents something. Israel shatters ceasefire versus Hamas refuses to continue releasing hostages. Free the hostages. This is going to be a very encouraging segment. So let's keep because it's going to seem like these are a lot of clips about killing the same guy. Actually, they killed a lot of major guys all in 1 week. This guy is Assam al-Da'alis. That's this guy up here. And 4 of them got clipped off this week. That's Da'alis. So he's the prime minister, Da'alis. And then they had to move quickly and they appointed a new prime minister 2 or 3 days later. This is a different guy, El Bardawil, with his wife. When they talk about women and children who are killed, what they usually don't tell you is it's usually the terrorist with his wife and kids. They're living in the same house. And for them to kill the terrorist in his house, his wife and kids are there. That tends to be they don't target women and children. We know that. They don't target women and children. But we don't really realize that to the degree that women and children get killed, they tend to be the wife and kids of the terrorist who's being targeted. So as you go north in Gaza from Rafah, which borders Egypt, you then get to Khan Yunis on the way more north.
الرسول قدوتنا. الله أكبر.
يمكن هناك أي تعمد لقتل مدنيين إسرائيليين
وعليكم ورحمة الله. والجهاد سبيلنا.
يمكن هناك أي تعمد لقتل مدنيين إسرائيليين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الرسول قدوتنا. والجهاد سبيلنا.
So Brother Wheel was knocked off in the middle of the week, and they had to appoint a third guy. So I had to appoint a third guy to take over for him.
Video obtained by Reuters showed the moment an Israeli airstrike hit Gaza City on Sunday, as officials said dozens were killed by strikes across the enclave, including a Hamas political leader. According to Gaza's health ministry, the death toll since the beginning of the war has now surpassed 50,000 Palestinians.
Now, 50,000, first of all, the number is exaggerated. It's a false number. Whatever amount the number should be, it doesn't tell you how many of them are Hamas. Let's say it's 30,000. Let's just say it's not an unfair estimate. If it's 30,000 Hamas, and if the number really altogether is 40,000, so of the other 10,000, how many of them are wives and children of the 40,000 of Hamas? And so on and so forth. You do the math. It's been, as we've seen for the weeks and months that we've been doing this, Israel is the most moral army in the world, the fewest target to civilian casualty and death numbers. They're fighting in an urban war, and yet, as I said, fewer target to person casualties than any other war in history.
In southern Gaza's Khan Yunis, a funeral was held for Hamas official Salah al-Badawiel and his wife. They were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the city, according to officials of the militant group. Badawiel was a member of Hamas's decision-making political office and had taken up roles such as leading the group's delegation for indirect truce talks with Israel, refusing to start second-phase talks for a permanent end to the war. The group has said it is still willing to negotiate and was studying bridging proposals from the United States. On Sunday, Gaza's residents reported an escalation in Israel's military action. Families mourned the loss of their loved ones and pleaded for an end to the war. Rights
3 words: free the hostages.
groups are also warning of a renewed risk of famine in the enclave after Israel began blocking the
A renewed risk of famine. For a year and a half, they've been saying famine. Any of these people look like they're suffering from famine?
entry of goods into Gaza again since March the 2nd.
A year and a half, it's like famine nonstop for a year and a half, but they never seem to be able to find anybody in any of the videos that is emaciated.
We got up in a panic and found ourselves covered in rubble, filth and dust, this woman said. The young men came and pulled out children from under brothers and sisters, the whole.
This guy look like he's hit by famine? So we left off with the killing of that first guy, Daas or something, and then they killed Bartoweel as the new prime minister. And in the same week, they then killed the next guy. I don't know if you picked this up as you were following news. Maybe that's why we really like to do this on Sunday and point things out. They knocked off in 1 week 3 consecutive #1 guys. Hamas succeeded one with another, pow. And they succeeded one with another, bam, in the same week. And you'll notice Israel, to get him, had to bomb the hospital. And the reason we practically don't know about it, unless you really scoured the newspapers, is because the president of America now is Trump rather than Biden-Harris. So if it were Biden-Harris, the papers would be filled with news of Israel attacked another hospital. But instead, under Trump, it's not news. News is that Trump has some executive order and some Democrat Obama judge is trying to stop him. That's the week's news. But nobody's bothering with Israel having killed this guy in a hospital, which is where they had to go to kill him. And likewise, where are the riots and protests and encampments at the universities over the hitting a hospital? Under Biden and Harris? Under Trump? They're too busy protesting about people getting thrown out of the country. And they're too busy hiding behind masks. I can't begin to process how any Jew who thinks he or she is proud to be Jewish possibly would prefer this Trump presidency over the Biden and Harris option. A Jew who's not proud of being Jewish and a self-hating Jew, I understand that completely. Bernie Sanders, George Soros, but how any Jew, how any of my relatives or your relatives who would vote for that other side, I have contempt for them. Still members of the family. I don't believe you have to break up family relationships, but quiet, seething contempt because Jewish lives in the state of Israel are at stake. You can't fool around with this. Paper straws are not more important.
Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah!
This video contains images that may disturb some viewers.
The aftermath
And maybe not others.
of an Israeli strike which killed prominent Palestinian reporter Hussam Shabat.
We heard the sound of the explosion near the hospital. We were shocked by the scene.
The journalist, who worked for Al Jazeera Arabic, was accused of having links to Hamas by the Israelis.
That's all we need to know. Next story. There is no sound in this video. Okay, get that idea.
Palestinians are uprising against Hamas. Extraordinary footage.
This is quite a story. We don't know what will come of it, whether it will generate larger, more intense anti-Hamas expressions, or whether this is sort of a one-time shot where these guys end up getting killed by Hamas later. But there were public demonstrations against Hamas in Gaza.
Has emerged from Gaza today showing thousands of Palestinians marching through the streets and chanting, calling for an end to the terrorist group's rule of the region. Palestinian civilians have finally realized the evil of Hamas, shouting Hamas are terrorists down the streets. But we haven't seen any of this footage on mainstream media outlets, with this commentator saying, "Before posting this video, I waited 14 hours for BBC and Al Jazeera to air it. They refused. Why? Because it shows Gazans furious at Hamas terrorists using their hospitals as shields, chanting loud and clear, Hamas are terrorists." Yes, that supports Trump's plan to crush the Muslim Brotherhood forces in Gaza. And to the clueless protesters in New York and London, do you still think you understand the Middle East? Think again. Israel and the Arab people now stand side by side against the rapists, the radicals, and the lies. And this commentator agreed, saying,
Be aware, though, honestly, among all of us, these demonstrators, as soon as they get Hamas out, which is not about to happen tomorrow, will turn on Israel. These are not pro-Israel, anti-Hamas people. Rather, these are people, they want to kill the Jews.
Massive crowds of Palestinians have taken over the streets of northern Gaza, chanting, "Down with Hamas. We've had enough, Hamas." I dare the New York Times or Mehdi Hassan to report on this. The leftists who have dedicated their lives since the harrowing events of October 7th, 2023 to supporting Palestine are turning a blind eye to the uprising because it does not suit their agenda anymore. Commentator Avi Yemeni said mass protests against Hamas sweep Gaza and the West Bank as Palestinian support for the terrorist collapse. Spare a thought for Western jihadists, leftists and woke right fringes reeling from this betrayal. Free Palestine from Hamas. The display of abandon against Hamas is refreshing, but many are not buying it. This commentator said, hundreds of Gazans are protesting against Hamas, waving white flags, calling for the end of the war. Does anyone believe them, or is this far too late?
So in Israel, here's how this rally was covered in Israel. First, they're yelling, "Hachutza," well, yelling in Arabic, translate, out, out, out. Hamas, yalla, hachutza. Hamas, get out of here. So again, I'll do it's Israel news showing Arabic station film, therefore putting on titles in Hebrew. I'll because I don't, I don't know Arabic presently. These are demonstrations against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They're continuing. The people want to overthrow Hamas. It began in northern Gaza,
עכשיו מדברים כבר על הפגנות גם בשוג'איה ובדיר אל-בלח.
Now it's starting to move south. We do not want Hamas, my brother. We don't want Hamas. Get out of here.
אחד מבכירי חמאס, בסם נעים, התייחס לאירועים. כמובן
An official within Hamas says he relates to the demonstrations.
שהוא הציג קונספירציה.
من يحرض على تصوير هذه المسيرات على أنها يعني ضد المقاومة بشكل خاص أو ضد حركة حماس بشكل خاص هم أشخاص معروفين منذ سنوات وهم يلعبون نفس
These are people who are known. These are like serious personalities who are against Hamas for several years.
دور ويقومون بنفس العمل من عواصم أوروبية وعواصم عربية.
בהודעה רשמית מטעם חמאס נכתב.
In an official response, Hamas said, by the way, this is the official logo of Hamas. That's the Temple Mount, their mosque on the Temple Mount, swords, and that's the map of all of Israel. That includes Judea, Samaria. It includes the Gaza Strip. But for the fools who think that a two-state solution, giving them Gaza and what they call the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, would bring peace, people don't want to recognize what they see in front of their very eyes. They don't want only Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. A two-state, they want a one-state. This is all of Israel, Tel Aviv, Haifa, the Galil, Beersheba. That's their logo. They're not about a two-state solution. That's why they say from the river to the sea, all of Palestine will be free. There's no room for two states. It's important to note. So here's Hamas's official response to the public demonstration against them.
קל יותר לספוג סבל ועינויים מאשר לעמוד עם האויב שלך באותה
It's very easy to absorb. It's very easy. It's easier to absorb the penalties from those who are against us.
ובאמת המפגינים פה מדגישים, זה שאנחנו נגד חמאס לא אומר שאנחנו...
The demonstrators do emphasize that although we are against Hamas, that does not mean we are for Israel.
בעד ישראל.
What we want, says this guy in Gaza, first is to put an end to Hamas. Because they are no resistance. We are the resistance. Inside of my chest is hidden our war against the occupation. Our houses are gone, our families are gone. We are the resistance, not they who sit outside of Gaza in Qatar in their fancy, rich environments, speaking as though they represent the people of Gaza. We are the ones who represent the people of Gaza.
הרבה מאוד זעם יש בהפגנות האלה על הנהגת חמאס חול.
There is great anger against the Hamas leadership who, like Khalid Mashal over here, basically is on exercise equipment in a 5-star hotel in Qatar.
עסקני טרור שחיים במלונות פאר ומשם אומרים לעזתי מה נכון לעשות. במיוחד יש כעס על האיש הזה, בכיר חמאס בחול הוא סמא חמדן.
There is particular anger at that guy because he's the Hamas number one right now, probably still in his third day. All the leaders of Hamas are chutz la'aretz. They're all outside the land. They're in Qatar and they're Iran, and they're telling us to go and lay down our lives for them. 5-star hotels, and he's got 4 wives. There's just something going through my mind, that Christmas song, 12 this, 3 this, 2 turtle doves, 5 hotels, 4 wives.
ראינו כבר בכתבה. זה שהעזתים מפגינים נגד חמאס לא אומר שהם מושיטים יד לשלום לישראל.
But be aware that despite their anger at Hamas, don't think they're extending a hand to Israel.
פשוט נמאס להם ממה שקורה בעזה.
Simply, they hate everything going on in Gaza.
באשמת חמאס, זה המצב ברצועה.
ورجعنا لعصر الحجر بامتياز رجعنا له كله حمير في السيارات.
Look at this. Everybody's got a donkey. Chamorim. They all got donkeys here. We don't have any cars. Everybody has a donkey. Donkey. In Brooklyn, it's pronounced donkey. Denise tells me outside of Brooklyn, it's pronounced donkey.
ההפגנות האלה מתרחשות ביממה שבה בכל רחבי הרצועה צה"ל ממשיך לתקוף, גם במקומות שבהם יש הפגנות. הלילה חוסל בג'באליה עבד אל-לטיף אל-כנוע, אחד מדוברי חמאס.
Meanwhile, at night, during the night of the demonstration, the chief spokesman for Hamas in Gaza was blown up by Israel.
זו דמות מוכרת בתקשורת הערבית. כנראה שהפגיעה בדרגים הפוליטיים של חמאס מאז חידוש הלחימה תורמת.
It was a very productive week. I don't know that we knew this, but they knocked off like a whole bunch of top-notch guys in Hamas this week.
לאובדן האמון של התושבים ביכולת של חמאס לחזור לשלוט בעניינים. חמאס שצמח ברצועת עזה מזוהה איתה מאוד. עדיין יש לו הרבה תומכים ברצועה. ראינו אותם מגיעים לצפות
But Hamas continues to have a huge popular support in Gaza among the rank and file also. The others are a breakthrough, but the majority of Gazans still stand with Hamas. Says we see them everywhere. We talk to...
יש מי שנמאס לו.
Well, as some pundits warn of deteriorating food conditions again in Gaza, the United Nations is refusing to verify that a Gazan famine, which was trumpeted for a year and a half by senior officials, ever actually took place. The head of the United Nations World Food Program, Cindy McCain, declared in May 2004 that northern Gaza had entered, quote-unquote, full-blown famine.
That is the wife of the deceased Senator John McCain. Turns out she's also an anti-Semite. She's very anti-Israel, although their daughter is very pro-Israel, because John McCain was pro-Israel.
In March of last year, Matthew Hollingworth, the WFP's interim director for the Palestinian territories, proclaimed, quote-unquote, famine is a reality in the Gaza Strip. 2 months prior, Martin Griffiths, then the UN emergency relief chief, said the Israel-Hamas war had brought famine to Gaza with, quote, such incredible speed, unquote, asserting that, quote, the great majority of 400,000 Gazans deemed at risk by UN agencies to be at risk of starvation are, quote-unquote, actually in famine, not just at risk of famine. Those assertions have had enormous diplomatic, legal, and societal consequences and led in part to the International Criminal Court arrest warrants issued for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. But the figures those people relied on were repeatedly retroactively revised, and a good chunk of them were debunked by a review committee within the agency that compiled them. And now, over 2 months after a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was implemented, and absent any substantiating data or visual evidence to such effect, UN agencies have gone quiet, dodging our inquiries as to whether and when a famine actually took place. We asked the office of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres earlier this month what evidence it had pointing to a famine actually occurring in Gaza during the war.
We talked about the very severe risk of famine. Those studies were done by the IPC, which is a group of UN agencies, and also a group of non-UN agencies, American, German, Europeans, and others, who've established a scientific method to talk about hunger, to classify hunger, and we stand by their findings. One thing we don't have, we may have, the UN have the world's most recognizable logo, but there's no brand management. There are a lot of people who can speak on quote behalf of the UN. I'm speaking on behalf of the Secretary General, what we've said here, and what others have said.
UN News Center. I'm not talking about the special experts or anything. I'm talking about the UN Central News Center. Reported extreme hunger and famine.
Well, there's a, we could go on for a long time. There is a qualitative scientific difference between hunger and famine. Famine is a very specific word. We have talked often about hunger in Gaza, and I don't think anyone can dispute that there was hunger in Gaza.
I dispute that there was hunger in Gaza based on reports, data, statistics, research that show there was no hunger. Maybe some individual person somewhere, but we have that in the United States also. I've been in parts of Los Angeles here where there is hunger in Los Angeles. New York City, there's hunger. But as far as widespread hunger, you see the videos, you see them marching in the streets. You saw them at the hostage releases. No way.
And I think we've seen it, and our colleagues, numerous UN colleagues, have come out and spoken to what they've seen with their own eyes. And as for the IPC, I think I've answered that question.
Guterres' office referred us instead to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, known as OCHA, and the UN World Food Program. But lead spokespeople for the World Food Program in Rome, New York, and Washington all ignored our inquiries, asking if the WFP could comment on whether famine had taken place. An assistant spokesperson said that no WFP representative is available to answer that question.
Here we have a rabbi, Chabad rabbi, walking out of morning shul on a weekday morning. He was at Minyan. He's walking out and he's beaten by an anti-Semite in France with his son, and they hit back. And this is shown as French TV, so they're speaking in French, and it's shown on Conan 11, the Israel national broadcaster. So the titles are in Hebrew, and I'll try to make it understood in English. This is an attack on Rabbi Aryeh Engelberg in the city of Orléans in France yesterday.
שוב זה קורה, שוב תקיפה אלימה נגד
Again it happens. Again a violent attack against Jews in France.
יהודים בצרפת. זה קרה אתמול בעיר אורליאון שמדרום
This happened yesterday in the city of Orléans, south of Paris.
לפריז, כשרב הקהילה היהודית אריה אנגלברג הותקף
And the rabbi of the community, Jewish community, was attacked in the street.
ברחוב. הערב בשיחה איתנו הוא שחזר את מהלך האירוע.
This evening, in a discussion with us, he explains what happened. I was leaving the synagogue where I'm rabbi. With my son, we were walking in the street. I saw there was a young fellow who was staring at us. And as soon as we showed up, he pulled out his cell phone, his portable phone, and he began to photograph us. In the form of like a selfie, and he started yelling at us, "Tell me, are you Jews?" That's what he looks like. I responded, yes. So then he said, all Jews are, the three dots are to take out the dirty word. All Jews, he said, are the children of prostitutes. That's. And then he said, okay, bastards, all Jews are bastards. And then he spit on us, and he did it once.
וגם ירק עלינו. עשה את זה פעם אחת, בהתחלה לא ידעתי כל כך איך להגיב.
And I didn't quite know how I should respond.
התמונות האלה כאן מתעדות את התקיפה והתגובה של הרב אנגלברג.
So this video shows what happened and what he did. He says, I grabbed his phone because I didn't want this video to be videoed and publicized.
אז פגעתי לו בפלאפון, כי לא רציתי שהווידאו הזה תפורסם, ויראו איך שמשפילים.
That it should be put on the internet how an anti-Semite attacked a Jew and the Jew did not respond. So I had to respond in some way. People would see a Jew responded.
עם יהודים בלי תגובה, אז הגבתי מיד, ואז התחילו מכות. הרביץ לי, כן, הגנתי.
So I responded by pulling out his phone. He then started to beat me harder. I defended myself.
על עצמי, נגע קצת בלסת, חקתי את הבן שלי שנמצא איתי שהוא לא יפגע מזה, הוא היה מאוד בשוק ממה שהוא ראה, ואז הגיעו אנשים כדי...
I guarded my son. He was a bit in shock, and then other people came for the purpose of stopping the fight or stopping the attack on me.
כדי לעצור את ההתקפה.
לאחר מצוד משטרתי קצר נעצר החשוד בתקיפה שהתברר כנער בן...
The police finally got there. They arrested the attacker, a 16-year-old with a Moroccan passport and Palestinian identity. There's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinians, but he had paper that called him a Palestinian Moroccan.
בן 16, המחזיק בזהות מרוקאית וזהות פלסטינית.
ערבי, הוא היה ערבי.
He was an Arab. He's an Arab.
הוא דיבר עם מבטא וגם...
He spoke with an Arab accent, and he cursed in Arabic.
גם קילל בערבית. באמצע המכות. פשוט לא...
In the midst of hitting me, he was cursing in Arabic. Obviously, I did not want to lower my head or in any way seem beaten or downtrodden. I wanted to stand my ground.
רציתי להיות מושפל, לא רציתי להוריד את הראש. נלחמתי, איך שאומרים, לא למעני, למען היד.
So I fought back. How do you say? Not for me, but for the Jewish people.
עדות, למען היהודים ולמען הבן שלי.
And that my son should know that his father fought back. The Jewish community in France has absorbed a great amount of shock from this incident.
הקהילה היהודית בצרפת ספגה זעזוע נוסף מהתקיפה הזו, והגינויים לתקרית הגיעו מצמרת השלטון.
And it's been condemned by government leaders in France. But that's what's going on in France. It has generated, not this incident alone, but there has been a huge French aliyah, Jews from France making aliyah, and it's raised prices of Israeli properties, particularly in the better communities. The sudden shakeup in the law of supply and demand, a major demand surging from France, while the supply remains the same, so it raises the prices of homes. Great investment, really. And now for our weekly segment on Colombia. You'll recall their university alma mater is sung to the same melody as Hitler's Deutschland, Deutschland über alles of Nazi Germany. Austria had their own national anthem to that melody too, and when Hitler adopted it, Austria changed their national anthem, but not Colombia. They kept the same melody.
A major announcement out of Columbia University just weeks before the start of...
You'll remember, first of all, last May or so, or August, Columbia's president resigned.
The fall semester.
University President Minu Shafiq announcing her resignation late last night, just a year after she took on the role.
That's right, and it comes after months of criticism and controversy over how Shafiq handled protests.
The DEI people at Columbia proudly announced that for the first time, they had named a woman as the university president. For the first time, they had named a Muslim as the university president. She continued making history by becoming the first University president at Columbia not to last 1 year and to resign.
On Columbia's campus and calls for the university to divest from companies with Israeli ties.
Here's Eyewitness News reporter Phil Tate.
This period has taken a considerable toll on my family, as it has for others in our community. Over the summer, I've been able to reflect and have decided that my moving on at this point would best enable Columbia to traverse the challenges ahead.
Vandalize federal property and make really life very, very difficult in this country for a lot of people. I will put every single college president on notice. We just lost another one today from Columbia. How weak, how pathetic are these people? How weak are they? Can you imagine these people running these colleges, and they're afraid to say anything even slightly negative to these groups that want death? The American taxpayer will not subsidize the creation of terrorist sympathizers on American soil. It won't happen. Colleges will end the anti-Semitic propaganda, or they will lose their accreditation, and every single last penny.
This is a speech in August 2024 while he was running for president, about 3 months before the election. It was a campaign promise, and he kept his promise.
Of federal support. You'll see how nice they'll be. You'll see, they'll change their ways very quickly, but it's not probably from the heart. That's the problem. They may change their ways, but not from the heart. They're changing it because that's brutal, but they're not going to change it from the heart, I suspect.
And so Columbia University named a new president, Katrina Armstrong, and Columbia celebrated a new era, and she welcomed, this past September or so, the new incoming class known as the class of 2028.
I am thrilled to welcome you, the students, families, and friends of the class of 2028 to Columbia University. Welcome.
I'm an alumnus. I'm an alumnus of Columbia University. I received a wonderfully sweet letter, mass-produced for everybody as an alumnus, about how excited she is to say hello and a new day arising at Columbia. She looks forward to being the interim president and celebrating the new era of unity and warmth at Columbia. This last September.
Well, this morning we're learning new accusations against the pro-Palestinian student activist who's been detained for helping lead protests at Columbia University over the past year.
That's right. The Department of Justice claims Mahmoud Khalil failed to disclose information when he applied to become a permanent resident. Good Day's Haley Fixler is at Columbia University this morning. Haley, what are you hearing about this?
Good morning, Dan Shoshani. Well, that information includes what officials now reveal is his involvement in a UN agency for Palestinian refugees and his work at the Syria office in the British Embassy in Lebanon. Now, the DOJ now says that his presence and his activities pose serious foreign policy risks. So here is what we know. There have been significant allegations that some members of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency participated in the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attacks in Israel. UNRWA has fired dozens of its own staffers after an investigation into the attack. The U.S. and other countries have since halted funding to the agency. Justice Department officials say because Khalil failed to include his membership in the group and continued employment with the Syria office, that alone is grounds for deportment. Now, originally, Khalil was arrested earlier this month by immigration officers as part of President Trump's crackdown on anti-Semitic and what they call anti-American campus protests. His lawyers continue to fight his deportation. About the new allegations, they say, quote, the government scrambled to add them at the 11th hour, only highlights how its motivation from the start was to retaliate against Mr. Khalil for his protected speech in support of Palestinian rights and lives. Khalil is...
There is no such thing as Palestine. There is no such thing as Palestinians. So there's no Palestinian rights or lives. Those are Arabs, Arab rights, Arab lives.
Next due in court April 8th. Now, these protests caused the university to lose $400 million in federal funding. The encampments and the building takeovers caused chaos on campus. The Trump administration demanded several changes in order to regain the money. Now, those policy changes include enforcing disciplinary policies like expulsion and suspensions, mask bans, and reviewing the Middle East Studies program. Now, yesterday, the education secretary announced the university is on track to get the funding back. Take a listen.
I have had such great conversations with Dr. Armstrong, Katrina Armstrong, and we have gotten now to that first level. Columbia has agreed. There were about 9 things we put in place. When she and I met, she said she knew that this was her responsibility to make sure that children on her campus were safe. She wanted to make sure there was no discrimination of any kind. She wanted to address any systemic issues that were identified relative to the anti-Semitism on campus, and they have worked very hard in a very short period of time.
The interim Columbia University president says that these changes are not a reaction to federal pressure. Now, here at Columbia, later this afternoon, we know a group has organized what they are calling a vigil in response to what they say are Columbia's concessions to the Trump administration. We also know that a Palestinian solidarity group here at the university is also encouraging people to wear masks in response to this mask ban. Live in Morningside Heights, Dan Shoshani.
Happens to be that the United States, almost all states, a great number of them, certainly throughout the Deep South, I think there's also federal law, people are not allowed to wear masks in public for political purposes. That came down from the Civil War era when the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, they wore those white hoods. And the reason for that outfit was to hide their faces at their public events. So it became most states and even federal law, you're not allowed to wear masks at for political reasons to hide your face. So that's not even a new thing. That's more than 100 years old. That's just an American thing forever, 150 years old. And now Trump is forcing them to do it. There's an expression, I heard it the first time during the Obama years. I think it was from Obama's chief of staff, when he said something like, when you have people by their private parts, their hearts and minds will follow. And once you cut $400 million out of Columbia University, suddenly everybody becomes ethical and moral.
And we have more now on Mahmoud Khalil, who is under even more legal pressure this morning. Some of the families of hostages kidnapped by Hamas during the October 7th attack are now suing the anti-Israel activists and several student groups. Let's get an.
This all happened this past week. Some people noticed that after October 7, the following day, October 8, there already were demonstrations at Columbia University supporting Hamas and supporting the anti-Semites. And the signs were professionally made. You can tell a handwritten sign versus a professionally made sign. And especially when you see 10 or 20 or 30 of them, like at a political convention, Republican or Democrat convention, where instantly they have the names of the presidential and vice presidential candidates. Clearly they knew in advance and they have the signs ready. The lawsuit raises questions. How did they have these signs ready on October 8, already moments after the October 7 massacre? Were they informed in advance, even if they didn't know there would be 1,200 Jews killed, did they get information in advance that there would be a massacre? And that lawsuit is brought by, as they say, hostage families suing Khalil and others.
An update from Alexis McAdams. She's live at Columbia. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Dana. So we've been watching these campus protests for months, and now we know people all across the country and around the world were watching them too, including the family of some of those hostages who were held against their will. Some of them did not make it. Now they're suing here, specifically suing Mahmoud Khalil and other campus protesters, saying they are an arm of Hamas and are aiding and abetting that terrorist organization. So the new lawsuit was just filed in New York. It says the protesters on Columbia's campus are spreading hateful rhetoric, saying Mahmoud Khalil and the groups that have been protesting on this Ivy League campus are all part of the Hamas propaganda arm of New York. Families of some of these hostages, many who were killed at the hands of Hamas, We want to look at their pictures. They all had stories. They want their families, the families want them to be held accountable, these protesters. They don't understand why this has been going on in these college campuses. They want to push for punishments here. More protests on campus yesterday, even though that the school cracked down. Students were masked up anyway, even though they're not supposed to be now. The Department of Education says Columbia needs to do more to get their funding back, and some teachers and students are angry.
Trump and Linda McMahon get to command universities to arrest and expel students. No! Free Mahmoud!
I have to mention this. So the crackdown on college campuses does continue as more students, Dana, are filing lawsuits, including a junior here at Columbia who just filed a lawsuit. She's from South Korea. She's a permanent resident, but she said she's not going anywhere, even though she was just arrested at a protest. Dana.
All right, Alexis McAdams, thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
A Columbia University student is suing President Trump and top officials in a bid to block her deportation after being arrested during anti-Israel sit-in earlier this month. Young Soo Chung, a 21-year-old junior and legal permanent resident from South Korea, filed a lawsuit Monday in Manhattan federal court, accusing the Trump administration of retaliation over her pro-Palestinian activism. Chung moved to the U.S. at age 7 and was arrested March 5th during a protest at a Barnard College academic building. She was charged with obstructing governmental administration and released with a desk appearance ticket. But days later, her family was visited by Homeland Security agents and she was contacted by a federal agent, according to the lawsuit. Her lawyer says she's still in the country, though her current location hasn't been disclosed. The lawsuit claims Chung's deportation case is part of a broader campaign targeting non-citizens who speak out for Palestinian rights, saying the government is trying to chill free speech. DHS responded to the suit by accusing Chung of engaging in concerning conduct at a pro-Hamas protest and said she is subject to removal under immigration law. Her dorm was one of 2 raided by federal law enforcement on March 13th, a move that sparked outrage on campus. Chung previously faced a school disciplinary case for posting "Wanted for complicity in genocide" flyers targeting the Columbia Board of Trustees, but was cleared of any rule violations. Her suit, which also names Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Attorney General Pamela Bondi, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and others, seeks to block her arrest and removal.
For more stories just like these, be sure to subscribe to the New York Post right here.
Right now, Columbia University professors gathering to speak out against sweeping policy changes. Last week, the Ivy League school agreed to several demands from the Trump administration to restore $400 million in federal funding. Lisa Rosner live outside the campus in Morningside Heights with the latest on all of this. Lisa.
Mary, this is the first day back from spring break, and right now behind me, a group of professors are holding what they call a vigil. This is organized by the Association of University Professors. They say they are dressed in black to mourn academic freedom. Last week, Columbia's interim president announced it would make several changes that were requested, including hiring 36 new special officers with arresting power, modifying the disciplinary process, and appointing a new senior vice provost who will review programs like the Center for Palestine Studies and the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies. The hope by the school is that the Trump administration will now restore $400 million in federal funding that it pulled. Student workers are also holding a protest outside the school at 1 p.m. Now, these professors say they're speaking out because they want to, quote, defend academic freedom, and they are holding signs that also read, "Hands off our students, faculty, and research."
The administrators are going to be susceptible to political pressure in a way that faculty are not. Faculty have tenure. We can't be sanctioned for the decisions that we make or for our academic speech.
I was a professor for 20 years at Loyola Law School. The First Amendment does not apply to people who are conservative. You're not allowed to discuss your opinions, even off campus, if it gets published. You will be fired. This is no First Amendment rights. You go to these different schools, you find that the departments of the social sciences do not hire professors who are conservative and do not give them an opportunity to be tenure track. So there is no First Amendment. Go ahead and say the word N-I-G-G-E-R. N-I-G-G-E-R. Even now, in my shul program, I'm not saying it. It's that much of a repression of First Amendment rights. You don't have the right to say anything you want. but you do if it's to attack Israel.
The organization End Jew Hatred has a different perspective. It says the Trump administration should withhold additional funding, giving us a statement that says, in part, Colombia is unwilling to specifically prohibit the most problematic types of disruptive protests, merely saying that protests in academic buildings are generally not acceptable. It also says Colombia.
University graduates today tore up their diplomas to protest the school's cooperation with the Trump administration. Graduates of the School of International and Public Affairs chanted "Free Palestine" as they destroyed their sheepskins. It was Alumni Day on campus. The protests are in support of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia grad student and protester now held by ICE agents. And they also object to the concessions made to curb protests on campus.
And we will continue to rage at this institution until Mahmoud Khalil is free. Until students are free. To fight for Palestinian rights and liberation.
Some protesters also calling for the dismissal of several Columbia University teachers and administrators.
Breaking news right now, Columbia's interim president is stepping down and being replaced. Katrina Armstrong has served in the role since...
That didn't take long, did it?
August. Board of Trustees co-chair Claire Shipman is taking over as acting president until a permanent appointment is made. Last week, Armstrong agreed to conditions laid out by the Trump administration to restore federal funding and combat anti-Semitism and harassment on campus. Some students and faculty members criticized the move, saying it allowed the federal government to assert political control over the university.
So the interim president was not able to serve the interim period that she expected. Now we go to another student elsewhere being arrested only due to some of it for time reasons.
On November 13th, 2023, a member of the University of Illinois Facilities Management staff contacted the police following reports of a student vandalizing several university-owned poles and signs with a black permanent marker. Here's how the police responded.
Hi.
You're going to issue a stop card, and it is permanent marker. 330, copy.
Hi. Hi. Can you two step out, please?
The person, correct? Not the person.
Stand by. We're going to get the complainant. We're just talking to the individual that matches the description. Who's your ID?
Time for.
Hi. Can you take your headphones off for us, please? Hi, I'm Officer Rao. This is Officer Pesha. We're recording, so just to let you know on our body cameras. Are you a student here? Yes. Do you have an iCard that you can produce to prove that to us? Am I required to show? Yes. Am I required? Yes.
Hey, he's here to identify her if you guys want.
We couldn't get those windows are painted from the other side.
Yeah, they don't really pull up there, so.
Oh.
Hereby 330. Just for 1043 too, if we do find the person and we do confirm the person, I want this person locked down.
10-4. Lisa, can you move out of the way, please? Move out of the way, please.
All right. Yes, confirmed.
100% positive.
100% positive. That's the tag that I saw on the backpack as well. 100%.
All right, please step out. Okay. So we're stopping you because someone observed you writing stuff in permanent marker on university property. Okay. So unfortunately, if it was chalk, it could be washed off. But unfortunately, it's permanent marker. Okay. So I need you to stand for me.
Have that back. I'll get it back to you in a minute. Am I being arrested?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You are. So we're
Am I allowed to bring my belongings with me?
Yeah, of course. Yes, yes. We're gonna get to the station and talk. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, whatever you have, you can take off.
All right. Well, yeah. Do you have anything on you that's going to stick, or, you know, any weapons, any knives? Put that on there.
Yeah, put that on the table. My bag?
Yes.
I have pepper spray, but okay with me.
All right, put that back.
In here.
Put your hands on the wall, both hands. I'm going to search you. Okay. Okay. Put your hands behind your back.
Okay, there goes another one.
This is the moment Tufts University graduate student Rumaisa Ozturk was arrested and taken into federal custody. Doorbell camera footage obtained by NBC News shows two plainclothes officers approaching the 30-year-old in Somerville outside of Boston. Ozturk at first appears to back away before more agents approach, one eventually taking her phone out of her hand. Officers then take her backpack off, handcuff her, and lead her across the street to a car. An onlooker heard questioning why the officers' faces are covered. Ozturk's lawyer says she was on her way to break Ramadan fast with friends on Tuesday night when she was detained without explanation. She says her client, a Turkish national, was in the U.S. working toward a PhD in child study and human development on a valid F-1 visa, which allows foreign nationals to pursue academics without the intention of immigration. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security today, writing in part, DHS and ICE investigations found Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization that relishes the killing of Americans. Glorifying and supporting terrorists who kill Americans is grounds for visa issuance to be terminated. DHS did not reference specific incidents, but in March of last year, Ozturk co-authored an op-ed for Tufts student newspaper, condemning the university's dismissive nature and condescending tone when responding to calls for the school to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies.
There is no such thing as Palestinian.
With direct or indirect ties to Israel. Ozturk's attorney says no charges have been filed to her knowledge and that she's been unable to contact her client.
Here goes another one.
Free speech is not a crime! Free speech is not a crime! Free Palestine!
Campuses nationwide erupting in protest just like this one at Tufts University as the Trump administration really doubles down on detaining non-citizen pro-Palestinian student activists. News Nation's Brooke Schaefer has more for us this morning. Brooke, ICE is not letting up with these arrests.
Yeah, they don't appear to be, Marky, and more are promised. A doctoral student at the University of Alabama, one of the latest students and Palestinian supporters detained by federal authorities. The university student newspaper said Ali Reza Darodi from Iran is in the U.S. on a student visa studying mechanical engineering. He was detained this week, though it's not clear what, if any, charges he is